And hello, welcome to another session, MythBusters, part of our Studio Take series as we continue this month talking about some of the well-believed and sometimes well-established traditions of voiceover, some of which are true, some of them are truisms, some of them lean toward false, and some you've got your own kind of options on. I think if you've been watching this series, the series has primarily been to suggest alternatives as opposed to saying that one approach is wrong and the other is right. And that's certainly going to be true today. But I'm going to make my case on a particular approach to audio chains. I'm going to start this out by saying that I understand that this may be one of the most emotional issues in voiceover, the whole issue of processing. And lots of people, I'll say most people, have their opinions on it. And this is not to bust anybody else's opinion, but merely to suggest an approach. And it's the one that I take. And really all I'm doing today is just modeling the approach I take. So if it's different than what you do, please don't take offense. Just kind of consider it, take it for what it's worth. All right, so getting to my little presentation here today, the Dane chain is what I've called today's session because today we're going to be talking specifically about the way I have myself set up. What we're going to cover will include a review of processing chains, what they're about, what I would consider destructive versus non-destructive chains, and then what is in the Dane chain. And to rewind a little bit from the other day, there are two modern types of audio chains or processing chains. One involves it can also involve other things too, but it involves having an external box that actually does some processing on your mic before it ever gets to your computer. That has the disadvantage of being kind of locked in, the stainless steel underwear approach. Now, obviously, you can make changes to your box, but what you can't do is to undo what you've done. Once you've recorded that is what is recorded, and there's no way to kind of undo that. The other approach, and which has become probably more popular, more common these days, is to use software filters. And some people actually will use a software filter before they record, and other ones will apply filters after they record. In all cases, I tend to prefer to do my processing after the fact because then I have the wiggle room to make changes later. And so our focus today, then, is on an approach that I would call a non-destructive chain. And this is by my own definition, okay, the whole destructive, non-destructive thing as it applies to this. I would describe destructive as a chain that actually changes the audio in a way that can't easily be fixed without going back to the original raw file that you recorded, the unprocessed file, and re-rendering the whole project. So if you got copy changes, for example, by nature you're going to have to, go back, make your changes to the raw audio, and then re-render the file back out again. Non-destructive can be fixed with very little fuss, whereas a destructive chain is more difficult to fix after the fact. Here's where I make the distinction as to what is a destructive chain, what is not a destructive chain. I would say that a destructive chain is one that makes audible changes or enhancements to the sound. Noticeable changes, in other words, that if you were listen to the original and then listen to the one that's been processed, you will notice distinct changes in the tone, in the amount of punchiness, in the overall effect of the audio. I would call a non-destructive chain one that makes inaudible or not noticeable changes or enhancements to the audio. Destructive filters I would consider to be any that involve sweetening. In other words, making something sound cooler or smarter or more powerful or giving it more presence or giving it more treble or in more noticeable bass or some kind of an equalization curve. anything that adds compression, which creates that punchy sound, gating, which pulls up low sounds in a way that you can't undo. Anything that alters the dynamics in an audible way, the dynamics being the differences between the loud and soft portions of the recording. These I would put all under the category of sweetening, audio sweetening. And everybody's got their own definition of that stuff, so I'll give you some latitude, you give me some latitude on that. But these are the areas that I would consider to be destructive, because once they have been done, the only way to undo them is to regenerate them again, to re-render them again. And then there are what I would call non-destructive filters. These are filters that if you apply them, they do not make, for the most part, they do not make audible changes to the sound. They would primarily be to clean up problems in the audio, to make adjustments that can be undone simply. They include noise reduction, like rumble and hiss and things like that, especially the low-frequency noises, ambient noises. Notch filtering, that's a form of equalization, but it's not applied to the part of the audio that's in the range of the voice. It's to areas above and below, primarily below, that can be impacted more by rumble and interference, that kind of thing. Mouth noise removal, all those nice little juicy noises that we make with our mouths while we're talking. I'll tell you a funny thing about that. One time I was in a studio doing a voiceover, and this was in the earlier days of, say, RX, mouth noise reduction. And one of the features in RX is the ability to, rather than listening to the voiceover, listen to the mouth noise that the RX filter is eliminating. And so what he did was he played back just the mouth noises, and it was disgusting. I had no idea that I was producing all of these little clicks and ticks and sloshes and things. But the beauty of the RX7 mouth noise removal, and this is the only one I've ever found that I can endorse, and it's not because I get anything out of it, it's just because I'm so enthused by it. It just does a remarkable job of removing mouth noise without affecting the sound. And this is a really big thing to me. I'm way into trying to make any kind of adjustments without impacting the sound noticeably. Normalization is another one that will adjust the volume, but it doesn't affect the sound other than making it louder. And that's just a relative thing and based on how loud you're playing it back. So that doesn't impact the final product. And the other one that I would put into the category, which kind of could be considered sweetening, but not really, is modest limiting. Limiting just means that, okay, if your peaks are like this, limiting will just push the peaks down a little bit, depending on how much you tell it to reduce the peaks. It'll just lower them down just a little bit, or a lot. You know, if you do a dramatic limiting, you can end up with almost what looks like a square wave. It's not a square wave, but you know, from a distance, from the 500-foot view, it looks almost like just a bar across the screen, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about extremely modest limiting, and I'm going to demonstrate this stuff for you today. All right, so my philosophy, and I'm about to do a little demonstration for you, is what I would call an unsweetened philosophy, or you might call it a sour philosophy, right? So the Dane chain is all about doing things to the audio to improve the quality without impacting the dynamics or the actual sound of the voiceover. So I'm not going to impact my microphone, how it sounds. My microphone is what they're going to get, is just the sound of my voice through the mic. It's clean. But there is a light amount of noise, and occasionally louder noise, from the street here. And so we've got that. I've got one computer under the counter here for my radio automation system that's running continuously, so there's a little bit of fan noise down there. But especially the street rumble is something that can be notched out. And I'm going to get into each of these individually. So I'm going to go through them quickly first. This is my little teeny weeny chain that I have. First, I do graphic EQ to just drop back the low frequency noise. Then I do the mouth declick from RX7, which I love. And then the voice denoise. Okay, and that's another one that it's just removing noise from the room. Primarily, it would be like the fan noise, things like that. Between the two of them, oh my goodness. And I don't even have to adjust them. I have not even tweaked these. All I did was just set them up with their default settings, and that did it for me. And so that I love that because I hate tweaking filters. It's just, that's it. Okay, and then the last thing I'll call a quick level dance, which I'll show to you. Let's go to a little demonstration here. I'm going to bring up a recent recording. I actually did this last night. And it's a dramatic kind of a recording. Pull that up a little bit out of the way of the camera. There. It's kind of a dramatic recording. What it is for a video sales letter, and those tend to be storytelling, hopefully true stories, but storytelling, relating a person's experience and then how they used whatever the product was and then the result of the product. So I want to listen to a little bit of this. I want you also to look at the waveform. You'll see that I'm recording at about, on average, about -9 dB, right around in there. That's where my average mic level is. Occasionally I'll, despite the fact that I have my mic set to where it shouldn't ever really pop a P, I'll get almost a popped P. And you'll see one little spike there. That could be a K or a C or something like that too. I actually already listened to it. It is not anything that's a note. I think it's a T actually. It is not noticeable. Sometimes you see something like this, but fortunately it isn't anything that you can actually hear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through my little chain. First, I'm going to listen to a little bit of it. My life quickly became all about my condition, and I turned into a completely different person. Little by little, almost without realizing it, I began planning my day-to-day around my arthritis pain. I found myself avoiding everything I used to love and enjoy, out of fear that the pain could get worse. I'll never forget the terrible embarrassment I felt when, during a particularly bad period of flare-ups, I had to wear Velcro shoes because I couldn't even reach down to tie my laces. All right, so there is the voiceover, whatever you want to call it. And you can tell that it's done kind of a dramatic style, and that drama will tend to also give you a more kind of push in certain places. There are passages in this voiceover, which is an hour long almost, that are very soft, relatively speaking, where, I'm varying my style throughout the course of the thing. So there are portions of it that are louder than others. There's some where you're really pushing it. Toward the end, where you're saying, click the button and order now and change your life. Those have to be a little more punchy. Okay. The end result is that your voiceover recording has quite a bit of variation in it. And if you're like the typical person, yours probably does too. Some people are much punchier than others. I've had people in studios tell me that I have a fairly good control over my relative volume. So the engineer is saying I don't have to be going like this all the time to compensate. But there's plenty there, and occasionally it's dramatically different. So here are the steps that I go through. Before I run it through my little process here, on my keyboard, I have the letter P assigned to, I better get to my window. If I hit the letter P on the keyboard, it brings up LoudMax, which is a wonderful little filter. And I have it set to minus 4.5 dB. And so what I do is I just hit P and then enter. And all that did was to just take some of the very, very highest peaks back. And I like to do that first before I run the noise filters on it, because I feel like if it's scanning and averaging, before, I don't know exactly what all goes into the filter's operation. But if it's scanning and averaging things, I don't want to give it a false impression of some of these peaks here. The next thing I have is T on my keyboard, and I can no longer tell you why I use the letter T, but I just did. Okay, and in there are 3 filters. The first one is graphic EQ, and I'm going to click Edit on that so you can see what I did. A graphic equalizer is a place where you can visually adjust individual frequencies to raise up or notch back certain frequencies of the audio. Very handy tool. And what I've done is to take everything from 40 dB down and to turn it all the way down. Yeah, okay. And the reason is because there's really nothing in our voice down in that range. But there are other things down in that range that introduce noise into our signal. So that's all I'm doing there, is just notching everything below 40 dB all the way down to nothing. The second thing I'm doing is to use the mouth click feature. And there's nothing for me to tell you here because I don't play with these at all. I have not made any adjustments. Everything is as it is default from RX7. And the third thing that I do is mouth denoise. And again here, the settings that are there are the settings that were there. I have not touched them. I think that they have these things tweaked wonderfully right out of the box. I'm totally satisfied with what they do, and I've not felt the need to make any kind of adjustments there. All right, so I'm going to hit apply. Actually, the way it works for me is, again, I hit T and enter. So, and it is now processing, and there's 30 seconds done. In other words, on a 30-second voiceover file, 4 seconds or so to do the processing of that. Then the last thing I do, and I do see a comment here from someone saying, well, technically Loud Max is part of your chain. Yes, that is true, though I apply part of it manually. And I'm about to show you the rest of my chain, which I also apply manually. As you look at this now, it's looking pretty nice and clean already. And if we zoom in on it, we can see that it has not taken everything down to 0. It hasn't gotten, it's not extreme. There's still some nice room sound, but not anything that is going to be really noticeable to the ear. There's just enough of it so that it doesn't have that kind of vacuous sound if everything is sucked down too much. The last thing I want to do is to bring this up to -3 dB. And -3 dB is 3 decibels below 0 dB, which is the maximum that a wave file can be before it becomes distorted. And that you can actually normalize to 0 dB if you want to, and you'll have no distortion. But it's kind of an industry standard to deliver things at -3 dB because then that gives a little bit of breathing room to the producer or the studio or wherever you're sending this, that they can make their own fine-tuning adjustments, which actually argues for not doing too much of processing ourselves. So we primarily so far have only done completely non-destructive things to this. I'm now going to do something that is probably pretty unorthodox, so don't be shocked, all right? On my keyboard, I have N set for normalize and P set for peak. And what I like to do is to normalize and peak reduce once, sometimes twice, depending on how the peak layout looks. So I'll go N normalize, P peak, and then I'll go N normalize again. What I have now is a nicely loud file. The peak reduction that I've done is not enough to be noticeable, but it is enough that I've compensated a little bit on the low end. If there are some softer passages, it has brought those up by normalizing and peaking. Now, if we look here, take a look at some of these lowest peaks right in here. If I run this process one more time, so I peak reduce and I normalize, what happens is that some of these lowest peaks are now just a little bit higher, and relative to the large peaks, they're not as far down. So the overall loudness is just slightly increased. But still, even after going NP, which is what we're talking about here, I'm going to move this ahead. There we are. I have to get my wave file back up. One moment. Did I actually close it? No, there it is. Okay. NP will give you, or actually I should say PNPN. It depends on how you want to look at it. Will give you a nice loud file, but it is not exaggerated to the point where it really has flipped over into the area of compression and limiting. It's more like just, well, it's normalization and limiting is what we're doing here. Now, if I listen back, I began planning my day-to-day around my arthritis pain. I found myself avoiding everything I used to love and enjoy out of fear that the pain could get worse. I'll never forget the terrible embarrassment I felt when, during a particularly bad period of flare-ups, I had to wear Velcro shoes because I couldn't even reach down to tie my laces. All right. I have a question here from Thomas. The noise level room tone is already reduced significantly. Theoretically, yes, it would bring it up some, but in my experience, it's not noticeably different. So, but I get what you're saying there. All right, so here we go with, now I'm going to make a change. This was kind of the point of this thing. I wanted to show you my little level dance, and then curses. That's the one problem with this. I have to keep pulling my audio back up. Okay, here we go. So we end up with good, strong levels. Noise is eliminated primarily. Very, very slightly compressed, you could say, but not enough to be noticeably different sounding, just enough to pull the lower passages up a bit higher. And as I said, it's still editable. All right, so if I wanted to make a change, let's say that the client made a copy change. Quickly became all about my condition. My condition became all about my condition. Okay, so all I've done here is to just cut it. And what I did was to kind of match my own level. You see that when I did it, it really does pretty much just match here. I was able to just kind of tailor my voice to the volume that I'm seeing. All about my condition became all about my condition. All about my condition. Now the problem I have is that there's a slight delay as I'm doing this feed live, so it makes it a little tough to edit. We'll try. All about my condition. My condition quickly became all about my condition. So became all about my. Yeah, this is frustrating because there's too much delay. Came all about my condition. Okay, so became all about my. Came all of. So I think that's came right there, and this is came right here. Came all about my. Quickly became all about my condition. All right, so it's a little bit low in volume. So all I have to do now is just normalize it and pull it back a little bit. My life quickly became all about my condition. Okay, so there again, it's just I did a quick level dance on it, and the end result is that it's very much the same as the rest. Now, if I wanted to get really, really picky, I could also go back and run the rest of that chain, the noise reduction and so on. But for a short little spot like that, not really noticeable. I think a lot of times you can get by without that. And so the end result, again, is something that when you've done the voiceover this way and processed it by this method, you end up with something that is clean enough and close enough to the original that without much effort at all, you can update the audio in your voiceover recording and send it on its merry way, and it all matches up nicely, and there's really no noticeable difference between what was original and what you did afterwards. It's not for everybody, but it works great for me, and it stays consistent with my own theories about how I like to deliver stuff. Unsweetened, basically raw audio with just the very smallest amount of touch-up in order to improve room noise, mouth noise, and just bring the volume levels just a little bit in, so it's not quite so variant from the low passages to the loud passages. Even that part could be skipped. For as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the time I could just normalize, but I do like to just trim the peaks back a little bit, so limiting in a small amount. The difference between 3 dB, minus 3 dB, and minus 4.5 dB is not much. And so what I do is I just wiggle back and forth a couple of times between minus 3 and minus 4.5, and I end up at the end with something that's normalized out to minus 3 with the peaks just a little bit compressed and the lower passages just a little bit increased, so the whole thing just smooths out a little bit. And so that is the chain as I do it. And so thanks for watching for this today. I want to mention something else that I did recently, and which, my gosh, I think as of today, I will be at $550 since I've made this change in a month and a half. This is on Fiverr. I found something that I can't believe that I haven't been doing. And I can't believe that most of us haven't been doing, frankly. When I realized it, the reason I called it Newton's apple is because it was like I got hit in the head with an apple when this occurred. And it was like, oh my gosh. And still, I needed to prove the theory. And so I started doing it myself. And it works. It not only works, it absolutely works. And the result is that I'm making considerably more income since I started this new technique. It's something that I believe every voiceover person should be doing, and I think that it applies equally well both on and off of Fiverr, actually. But it is something that, especially on the pay-to-play sites, people are not realizing is available to them. And so far, I'll tell you honestly, I have not seen very many people pick up on this head slapper yet. It's a $49.95 idea. It's a video that I put together. Put a lot of effort into it, actually, and it so far it's a little bit on the disappointing side for me that I haven't had more people take advantage of it, because I feel like if they only knew that. And the other thing is I'm just guaranteeing it. Absolutely. So that if it doesn't work out for you, or if you don't find that it is making you considerably more than what it costs, I just ask for your money back. Matter of fact, along with giving your money back, I'll give you another free head slapper. So I suggest that you think seriously about it. You can go to thegigdoctor.com/headslappers, thegigdoctor.com/headslappers. Or if you go to thegigdoctor.com, there's a pull down there of products. You go to head slappers that way, but choose number 4. And don't miss out on this. It is something that it's like you're getting ripped off if you're not doing it, is what it amounts to. And you really need to know what to do and to start doing it. It's about, 15, 20-minute video, something like that. Strongly suggest that you check that out. thegigdoctor.com/headslappers. All right, well, I hope this was helpful to you today. After the main feed, I'm going to get in there and we'll respond to those who are on live with us. So if you have any comments in chat that you'd like to pop in with, I would absolutely love to hear from you. And I will be back with another as we start kind of winding down the month of October with our head slappers here, with our rather MythBusters. If you've missed any of these MythBusters, then you can see them all on YouTube for now. I'm not sure that I'm going to keep those up there permanently, but for right now, they're all archived so far. So have a look at them if you have the chance. And I'll be back with a Wednesday edition of our get-together here, and we'll have some more fun together tomorrow. So see you then.